today. This is an interview with Dr. Randolph D. Smoak, Jr., who was president of the State Association 1983 and 84. And the interview is being conducted in Dr. Smoak's office in Orangeburg on December 18th, 1992. And interview is conducted by Dr. Laura Brown and Miss Monya Green. And Dr. Smoak, I think the first thing I'd like to say is, you know, this interview is conducted for the State Archives, where Dr. Charlie Brown is getting this project together. And I want to ask you a few questions first about your family and about yourself, who your parents were and sort of where they came from, if you know all this sort of history, anything that you might want to say about your family and where you grew up, about early influences in your life, etc. So you just go right ahead.
Okay, I was born in Bamberg, South Carolina, on May the 5th, 1933, and my father and his family have been lifelong residents of that area, and certainly of South Carolina in the past quarter century. My mother was from Georgia, and I attended the public schools in Bamberg and graduated in 1951 and went to the University of South Carolina, where I did my pre-med work, and then of course went on to what was then the Medical College of South Carolina in Charleston, and finished in the class of 1959. The influences early on in my life, I think, would probably stem particularly from our family physician, who was Dr. Henry J. Stuckey. And Dr. Stuckey was the typical, in my view, individual practicing country medicine, family practice. He was an outstandingly respected physician in the community, and certainly has left a legacy in the form of scholarships and other things since his death a number of years ago. I think from about the age 12, I had the yearning to become a physician. And probably as most, that was my role model for medicine in those early formative days. That carried on until, of course, I had other exposures in college and medical school, and then that shifted to other individuals who became influential in that process as years passed.
Good. Now, you went to the Medical College of South Carolina at that time, which is now the Medical University.
That's true.
And can you tell me a little bit about your days at the Medical University, and then maybe something about your internship and residency after that?
Well, the Medical University at that time had just had the brand new hospital, which one thing I can always remember, it cost $10 million, and we were appalled to know that $1 million of that was put in the ground in the form of pilot. Yeah. One fact I can always remember. So anyway, there was a brand new hospital there, which of course has been transformed many times since that time. We were among the very first who were housed in the alumni dormitory at that time, which since has ceased to exist and become used for other purposes. The school, of course, was very clinically oriented and very much depended upon its clinical faculty for teaching, and I think that that was a real asset. And I might add that one of my earlier clinical rotations happened to be involved in anesthesia when you were very active in anesthesia, and I learned a lot from you in that rotation. So I hadn't even thought about that, but I can single that out too.
Well, I appreciate that compliment.
When I finished. Well, in one event that occurred, I had infectious mononucleosis with hepatitis of a limited extent when I was junior medical school student, so I was out for about 6 weeks from Christmas on. So I had to go to summer school about 6 weeks and make up that time. And I guess one of the unusual things, not many times you go to summer school to make up something, but that was quite an experience to go through itself. We had an outstanding class, and many of whom have gone on have been very high achievers in medicine and academic institutions, and we've had some outstanding clinical physicians who practice in the state of South Carolina since then. I went to Emory-Grady and did my internship, which was a straight surgical internship, and had a wonderful experience there. The motto there is do one, see one, teach one, and that was sort of the philosophy. I did an awful lot, got to see and do a lot, and worked an enormous number of hours during that year, I guess as many other people have. From that point on, I was in the service for a couple of years and lived in France and stayed in the Air Force for 2 years, and then came back to Charleston for my residency in surgery.
Well, how did you decide to go into surgery? To do
Well,
any specific thing that you can pinpoint?
Well, I certainly can. I was, I worked here in Orangeburg during the summers while I was in medical school. And I worked in the operating room and got to assist a great deal with Dr. V. Wells Brabham, who was one of the mighty well-known surgeons and held in very high esteem here in this entire community and locality. And that was a great influence on my decision to go into surgery. I think the other aspect was probably my association with John Hawk, and I was very interested in OB/GYN at the same time, but when I looked at the internship and they insisted that to go in the OB program there in Charleston that you had to stay there and intern, and I felt like it was important to see medicine practice in a different community environment, so I elected to go elsewhere for my internship, and then of course with the intervention of service that sort of changed my mind further, and I did spend a good bit of time on orthopedics and general surgery while I was in the service, and that kind of pushed me on into the general surgery area.
And then there wasn't much question about where you were going to practice. Your decision?
Yes, that was not straightforward either, Laurie. I really had great interest in surgical oncology and viewed the opportunity to go back to the medical university on academic staff. During my last 2 years, I became interested in looking at some postgraduate training, and with the help of John Hawk, I went out to MD Anderson Hospital and spent a senior surgical oncology fellowship out there with the expectation of going back to join John at the medical university. John, of course, at that time changed and went into private practice himself, and I sort of decided that maybe I was not cut out for the role of academics to move from place to place to go up the academic ladder, and that maybe private practice was more my role, so that's how I ended up in Orangeburg.
And that's been a very satisfying practice, hasn't it?
It has indeed. I came here with a little to offer except availability and a lot of areas that were peripheral to what most of general surgery was done in this community, because there were 7 general surgeons here were doing a broad spectrum, and I, of course, brought in the opportunity to go into doing chest surgery, the first peripheral vascular surgery here, and major head and neck surgery, as well as some of the major tumor surgery, which was not being done here. So I started out, you might say, with the major surgical procedures rather than the straightforward gallbladders or hernias and hemorrhoids. But it's been a very rewarding experience. We've loved living here, practicing here, and like every place else, there are always some frustrations along the way, but I'm sure that they've been far less than in many other places.
But now, Randy, you say we've enjoyed it here. When were you married?
I married Sandra Harvin in 1959, 2 days after I finished medical school. And we have, of course, lived in Atlanta, France, and Charleston, Houston, and then here in Orangeburg. We've had the fortune of having 4 lovely daughters, and enjoyed raising them here in Orangeburg. And Sandra has always been extremely supportive of not only my role as a physician in medicine, but my keen interest in organized medicine and the time that it took to carry out the obligations there. So they have been a very, very supportive family of everything I've attempted to do.
Any grandchildren yet?
No, don't have any of those.
Not yet.
I tell people I'm too young for that.
Sure you are. Now, when you say she's supportive of you in organized medicine, why don't you tell me just a little bit about how you maybe got started in organized medicine? What made you think about being active in organized medicine and medical societies, etc.?
Well, I guess earlier on I had the opportunity to visit the SCMA annual meeting a couple of times back when it was held in Myrtle Beach, and I became somewhat interested in it and did participate in it as just a dues-paying member when I first came to practice in Orangeburg. And in 1972, I was asked by the local medical society to represent them as a delegate and then as what was called counselor or board of trustee member as we know it now. And that's really how I became particularly involved in it. It was, I can always remember that Lawton Sally was on the committee that asked me to serve and came down one night and talked to Sandra and me about taking on this new role, which I was glad to contribute, and I think that was the initiation of all of my days, weeks, months, and years of it since then.
Mm-hmm. But now, what were some of the offices you held in the state association, and what were some of the issues facing us before you became state president? Or even while you were state president? It's awfully hard to separate these things.
Well, Laura, I had the fortune, I guess, of serving almost in every post along the way. I was not only served as a counselor from our district and ultimately as vice chairman and chairman of the council, and I think I was probably the longest serving vice chairman. I spent 5 years under 3 different people, so I probably attended more meetings altogether than most everybody else collectively, it seems. But I had the chance to serve as in finance committee chairman, investment committees, the liaison with the Blue Cross Blue Shields, the trial attorneys, the hospital association, and many of those things. As a chairman, I really had the chance to see the day-to-day operation of the organization to the extent that I formed some opinions as to how things, in my mind, should have been changed. Prior to that, we had tremendous expansion in our association, and I happened to be on the committee that hired our executive vice president, who was full-time back in mid-70s. And I think that we went from where the council met once a quarter on a Sunday afternoon and had a part-time person to then one of a full-time executive director with several people as staff, who then became meeting on a monthly basis or every other month for the full council, and taking on issues of a changing organization. We saw tremendous growth in membership during that time. Some of the issues were beginning to occur as far as where do we go in the sense of a building. We did construct the SCMA building out by Richland Memorial at that time. I had a part in that. And our purpose, I guess we would say, as an organization. Before that, I think it had been probably a little bit less well defined. We saw a more active role of medicine at all levels within the state, as well as on a national level. Then we were looking at some of the changes that occurred as a result of Medicare and Medicaid implementation a decade earlier, the changes that were affecting patients and physicians. We saw the changes in insurance practices that were all of a sudden people who had not had insurance in the past were covered. I think charity was somewhat lost in part in those areas because people were funded to a large extent and in an open-ended fashion. I think that was one of the true problems that we've had in my term of practice. I would say that in the year as chairman, I realized that we needed an organization of professionals to carry out what we needed to do as an association, and also to set the tone for the organization for the decade or two in the future. And I did not think we had that in place. I was fortunate enough to convince some other people of this, and I think one of the monumental changes in my tenure with organized medicine in our state was that of getting the McManus firm to come in and take a look at our organization, see what we were doing, what we could do to restructure it, because at that time we had the SCMA more or less as a parent, and then we had the building fund, which is another organization. We had the foundation, which was running the PSRO at that time, which was almost another entity. We had the Members Insurance Trust, which is still another entity, in addition to several SOCPAC and SCIMR and several others. So I felt like those all need to be brought together, and indeed that's what McManus came back with. And so with the help of the heads of those other subsidiaries, we put that in place, and in the course of that we sought a director to carry out the function of all of these, and even the prior director applied, but we chose Bill Mann, who has certainly been a real giant in terms of moving our organization forward. Our very close and deceased friend Leonard Douglas was a real tremendous help to me in getting that accomplished, and I think that was one of the highlights of my time as president, to see the organization be restructured and positioned to take on the issues that we're going to face medicine over the next decade or two.
That was a real accomplishment. There's a lot of things that came up during your time as on council and during your term as president, and I think that you gave information to the members of the society, of the state association, through your president's letters. You kept pretty well informed, all of us, and that was something that I think that everybody appreciated. And I know that you were on the SOCPAC board at one time also, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Now you were also on the AMPAC board,
Right.
which was another step for our association. Is there anything else that you might
Well, I would say,
mention about?
I thank you for your recognition of the PR activities. That was one thing that I identified when I was preparing for my year as chairman, excuse me, as president, that we did not have a good PR force, and it was just a hit and miss sort of thing at our annual meeting. I felt like that was an important thing for us to develop, and I asked for an AMA team to come in and survey our association and make recommendations, which they did. And following that, we then hired a part-time consultant that on a year-round basis, and with some definite plans to move forward to a full-time person and move that activity in-house over the course of several years, which I'm pleased to see has been accomplished, and I think they've done an outstanding job. One of the several things that I felt as president, that I did go to the grassroots, where most presidents had made about 15 county society visits a year. I made more than 30.
Yep.
And I felt like that I initiated the media coverage. I visited the editorial boards of the newspapers from Greenville, Charleston, Columbia, Florence, and several others, to open up avenues of communication with the media. We did the same thing with some of the TV and radio stations. And as a result of that, during that year, we had a tremendous amount of exposure to the media, which we had not had in the past. And I think that's waxed and waned with time, particularly concerning the particular issues at the moment or the person's interest in PR activities, but I think that was a giant step forward in what we have done since then. Along the same lines, I think that I tried to carry this message to the membership, as you kindly remember. The President's pages were something that I felt like gave us an opportunity to address some of the issues, and I was very proud of my inaugural address, which happened to be on the April the 15th, which is the day everybody remembers when you pay your taxes that year. But they were kind enough to print that in the journal the first time, I guess, ever, and I felt like that there were some things that were mentioned there that, in looking back over it, certainly have come to be true to a large extent, that we were at a real crossroads in Madison. The activities since then, of course, as you mentioned, I was on the SOCPAC board, and I was chairman of SOCPAC from '84 to '88, and we saw a tremendous growth in activity and developing that into a really effective political organization, getting into races, and for the first time having enough funding to be an effective individual entity. And I felt very pleased that we were able to do that. I think that was one of our best hours from a political standpoint. Along with the same venue, that was that of lobbying. We initiated a more effective lobbying program about during the time of my chairmanship and presidency. And before that, we would have somebody, a group of doctors, show up when there was some issue that was tremendously important. But this was the first time that we really put in place somebody on a full-time staff basis to monitor the legislature and call upon us for testimony and call upon us for assistance in contacting people in the legislature when there were issues of importance to medicine. I think that was a particularly important, successful story in itself, and we've had great success in the political arena. And some of that too stems from the McManus report, in that we need to be more effective in addressing the social issues and interacting with government and other agencies, which I think we've effectively done over the years. Sure have.
Now, tell me just a little bit about your activities on the AMPAC board. You were elected to, what year was that?
I was elected to the AMPAC board in 1984. And let me say that I was fortunate to have that. It's the first time we've ever had anybody from our state. And I certainly have to give credit to our AMA delegation, and to particularly to Bill Watson, who was on our staff at that time, who had been AMPAC executive director in the past and knew the ropes of how to get things done in terms of a nominee being placed on the AMPAC board. But Tucker Weston and John Hawk and Watus and Tanner and Harrison people and others certainly made contacts on my behalf and really boosted my opportunity to have that appointment. It was a wonderful experience. I went in at that time with 2 others from the South. It was unusual to have that many at one year, but we had a nucleus that really, over the course of the time I was there, were most effective in running that organization. We had a great success story in several elections, and I learned a lot about the political process, and I loved it. I had the fortune of serving as chairman from '88 to '90, and which gave me a lot of exposure on a national level and to state societies and a good bit of travel, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Took a lot of time away from home, but I was most willing to give up my vacation and some other time to carry out that activity because it was a truly rewarding experience. I made a lot of friendships with those people that have been very rewarding and will always be looked upon fondly in the future. So it was a great experience.
A nice experience.
It sure was.
And now you're on the AMA board.
Yeah, and that's because I'm just getting started on that, but that's a story that in itself is one of failure and success. When the delegation had sort of poised me to make a run for this a few years earlier, and it was a matter of sort of picking the time to run, and my advice overall had been to run for the board as soon as I completed my tenure as chairman of AMPAC. And I can well remember that coming out of OSMAP, which is a meeting of the State Association of Presidents, and Dan Brake and Walt Roberts and John Simmons and Don Kilgore and all came out, and they had just had an excellent discussion about Dan's Health 2000 plan, which is certainly something he pushed when he was president. And he said everybody was so responsive, said now's the time, we got to make the move. So we all huddled and talked about it for about 24 hours, and a decision was made to move on in that particular year. So we did, and had put a tremendous effort into it. I did personally, the entire delegation, many friends in the state on my behalf, and it was just a wonderful outpouring of support. We were up against very strong competition we knew, and of course I came 2 votes short of being successful, even though I had a constitutional majority which should have elected me. But nevertheless, that's the way it went. And I guess one of the finest moments, Laurie, looking back, was in the moment of defeat. And I have to say this because it's been said to me hundreds of times that my comments, hoping that I had the grace to handle defeat, was so well received by the House of Delegates that they were, I think, extremely moved by that, and that the way we conducted ourselves, not only Sandra and me, but the delegation too, that we had fought a hard race, we were not successful, but we had nothing to be ashamed of, and we had had a wonderful experience in doing it. So coming back the second year was, we knew a lot more about how to go about it, and we felt like that it was a good opportunity that I could be successful. We really were running for a 1-year unexpired term, which we felt like we had a very good chance of achieving. And when the last moment arrived, it was unreal that we had garnered enough votes that the top 3 vote getters, I was one of the 3 for the 3-year term. So that was a real plus, and we're delighted about that success story. But so things work out for the best.
They work out for the best.
I have enjoyed my 6 months on the board. It's been exciting. Of course, a tremendous number of issues before organized medicine right now that we're all having to face and deal with, and the board has a great responsibility in all of that, and I have found it not only to be very challenging, but and an awful lot of work to be done, but I think it's something that I will certainly continue to look forward to with great enthusiasm and vigor in dealing with that.
Well, it's a little difficult to do this and run a practice too and be active in the state association, et cetera, isn't it?
Well, it's not easy.
Time consuming.
That's right. And you have to plan in advance. That's, I think, the key to being able to do this. And I have tried very diligently to do that so that I didn't have conflicts that created problems for my partners and other people that I had some obligation to. So that's worked out very well from that standpoint. We have tried to develop things in advance that we knew were forthcoming and tried to minimize the conflicts that might arise at the last moment. So far we've been very successful with that.
Been successful.
Yeah. And I must say that even though I have an opportunity to be on the national level, that my commitment on the state level continues to exist, and of course as an honorary member of the Board of Trustees I attend, and I enjoy that participation. It's still, you got to keep your roots where you started, and I don't ever forget those. And so I'll always be ran into that group that put me where I am now, and that won't change.
Well, good. Anything else that you might think of that you might add about any of this career that you might want to put up for posterity?
Gee,
You've covered things fairly well, I think.
there's so many things that it would be hard to single out without omitting others that might be equally as important, or individuals. And I guess I would say that people have been such an important aspect of not only my career in medicine, but my participation in organized medicine. And those, I think, have made the difference along the way, and I'm sure will continue to be, because I'm personally a very people-oriented individual, and I think that we must always try to remain as the noble profession that we started out to be, dating back over the last several hundred years, several thousand years. And I would hope that we can demonstrate to the public always that, in our patients, that we put them first, we have their interest in mind when we make decisions that may seem self-serving. I believe that we should band together as a profession and fight for what is right for our patients, and also at the same time to allow medicine to progress, which has been difficult at times, but I think we can do it. I think we are facing tremendous changes, and we're going to have to band together to try to preserve some of the medicine as we've known it. Otherwise, big business and government is going to intervene to the point that we will not recognize medicine as we have historically, from both the standpoint of the patient's well-being and our success in terms of carrying out our commitment to those individuals as patients. So I look back on the, as you mentioned, the President's page in my inaugural address in 1983 and think, well, we truly were at the crossroads of medicine. And those things we just talked about have, so many have come to play such an important role in the delivery of healthcare system as we see it now. The transition we're going through now was projected. We've still, in my opinion, got a little further to go with the public opinion. I don't think the public has truly recognized what will be happening to them in getting medical care. Now, everybody's talking about access and cost of care and control of that and still preserving quality. But those sometimes are words and don't really carry the true meaning of what will be given up to achieve those things as far as the public and patient understanding them. Somewhere along the line, some source of limitation of care or rationing or whatever budgeting process may occur is going to impact our ability to deliver care as thoroughly as we would like to all of our patients or to all of our patients receiving it. And that's an issue that the public has not had a thorough debate on. We've seen things like technology and its advancement, and of course its role and its cost to us all as an industry. We've seen problems about dealing with issues that are ethically of great concern because of development of technology. Those are things that we will all have to deal with, and the public's going to have an integral part before we can resolve all the problems of access and cost and delivery and quality.
Well, I tell you, you just are optimistic about the future of medicine.
I'm optimistic about it, I surely am. And I know that there were people who preceded us by generations that had problems that they thought were of great magnitude, and perhaps they were for those times, that we have to deal with them. And I think we can. And I believe when the changes that are in the process of occurring now do take place, and that may be 10 years from now, we will see physicians who will be happier with their practice. They understand the limitations. They may not have known it as you and I have known the system. And I think that they will practice good medicine. They will continue to be fine, noble individuals in a wonderful profession. And they will not have some of the frustrations, hopefully, that maybe some of us have had in the last decade or two going through these transitional times.
Well, I think that's a wonderful outlook. And now, in addition to all of your activities in medicine and your practice now, what else do you do?
Oh, my goodness.
Spend some time with your family or church, such as that?
I try. I surely do. I've always tried to balance out things that I did with my family time and with my time in organized medicine and other interests that I've had. And as Sandra's always said, all I needed was one more interest in something, because I love to hunt, fish. I like to go snow skiing with my children. We do a lot of things as a family, and I just love the out of doors. I love playing golf, playing some tennis with the children, and so we do a lot of things of that sort. Sometimes it has to be between other obligations, but we always try to fit it in, because I feel like that family time together is very important, and I've tried my very best not to sacrifice the interest of my children and family to the extent that I had a greater interest in medicine, organized medicine activities. So we've always been very cognizant of that. And I guess one of the interesting comments that I can remember was Boyce Lawton, who's a family practitioner right nearby, told me some few years ago at school one day. He said, I come out here for every activity my children are involved in, and said, I never fail to see you, and I don't know how you always get there. But and that's been my approach.
Well, that's good. Now, would you do all this over again?
I would do it all over again in the blink of an eye.
All right.
I look back, and I'm sure there are things that could have been done better. And I would like to think sometimes that I had had more time to commit to a more thorough outcome of certain things that I've been involved in through the course of time here. But I look back upon it with pride and with a sense of success and outcome, not only in the practice of surgery in this community, but in organized medicine we were talking about. And I certainly would would go back through the whole thing again if opportunity were there.
Well, good. Is there anything else you would care to add to this interview, or comments to make, anything?
Well, I would say that I think it's been a wonderful opportunity to be a part of organized medicine. I think it's unfortunate that more physicians don't take an opportunity to be a part of it because they would reap benefits. There's a tremendous amount of talent out there among physicians that's not being utilized because of their lack of interest or their interest in other things that displace their time they could put into organized medicine. I believe that the associations I've made in organized medicine have been just outstanding and will always be a highlight of my career looking back upon it. As I said earlier, the people make the difference.
Well, Randy, it sure has been a pleasure talking to you and getting this information for the state, and just seeing you again and really knowing you since you were a medical student and all these years. And I, for one, appreciate all that you've done in the State Association and for medicine as a whole, and on behalf of the State Medical Association and Manya and me and all your physician friends and everybody, I want to thank you for this interview, and it's really been a pleasure seeing you.
Thank you. It's always wonderful to have a chance to sit and visit with some old friends, and as you said, I can so fondly remember you from my medical school days forward, and we could sit here and talk about dozens and dozens of people in the medical school and around the state that have been of that same support and had that same interest and had that sort of influence. And I think that you have to commend Charlie Bryan and those who are so willing to, and yourself, who are taking on this obligation, and will be of hopefully some real importance to people in their review of this and future generations.
We hope so. And I guess you might have something else to do today, so we'll sort of bring this interview to a close, I guess.
Well, thank you. I've got a full day schedule. I was glad we could work this in.
Yeah, I am too. And thanks again, Randy.
Well, thank you too.